From the 7th to 8th of July 2026, leaders of all 32 NATO member states gathered at Ankara, Turkey for the NATO summit. Hosted by the Turkish President Erdogan and chaired by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, the summit brought together US President Donald Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, European Union leaders, and of course, all the head of government of NATO members. The agenda focused on defense spending, military production, and future of transatlantic alliance. NATO reaffirmed collective defense. Leaders renewed their commitment to Article 5 of Washington Treaty, reaffirming that an attack on one NATO member is an attack on all. They described collective defense as the cornerstone of the alliance and pledged to strengthen deterrence against future threats. 70 billion euros for Ukraine and debate over Russian asset. NATO allies pledged 70 billion euros in military equipment, assistance and training for Ukraine during year 2026, with a commitment to maintain the same in 2027. Leaders also welcomed the European Union's Ukraine support loan, financed through proceeds generated from immobilized Russian sovereign assets. However, the wider question of using frozen Russian assets remained politically and legally debatable, with some governments supporting the approach while others took it as an act of instigation. Zelensky secured new military support. President Volodymyr Zelensky left the summit with renewed political backing. President Trump announced that Ukraine would be permitted to manufacture Patriot air defense system under US license, strengthening Ukraine's long-term defense industry while expanding cooperation with NATO partners. NATO accelerated defense production. The alliance announced major initiatives to expand defense production and joint procurement. Leaders highlighted increased investment in military manufacturing, drone technology, artificial intelligence, logistics, and supply chains, reflecting a shift from setting defense targets to delivering military capabilities. A reset in US-Turkey relations. One of the summit's most significant diplomatic developments involved Turkey. President Trump announced the lifting of US sanctions imposed after Turkey's purchase of Russian S-400 air defense system. President Trump also signaled support for discussions on Turkey's possible return to F-35 fighter program, although any final decision would require approval from US Congress and further negotiations. The 2026 Ankara summit demonstrated that NATO remains committed to collective defense, while increasing military investment and long-term support for Ukraine. At the same time, it highlighted evolving geopolitical realities, renewed strategic partnerships, and continuing debates over how Europe should finance its security.